Back to our top story. Tensions escalating in Ukraine with no signs that Russia is willing to back down. There are an estimated 20 to 30,000 troops right now in the Crimean region. The armed pro-Russian forces refusing to let a foreign military mission enter the region. They're firing warning shots into the air, and Russia is threatening to push back against any sanctions, saying those sanctions could boomerang back on the U.S. Sounds like a threat. Well, they're including not letting American inspectors look at weapons and including nuclear bombs in the country under the START treaty. Joining us now to discuss the possible fallout for the United States, something we need to keep an eye on, Stephen Yates, former Deputy Assistant to Vice President Dick Cheney for National Security Affairs and a distinguished fellow at the Hamilton Foundation. And it's great to have you here.
Thank you, Jamie. Very good to be with you.
20 to 30,000 troops. Any significance to the number?
Well, it's obviously not a small number, and what we've seen really with Russia, it's this encroachment strategy where it takes a little bit of territory, moves forward, and tries to convince people in the West that that's where it's all going to stop. And what we have right now is basically a full-on takeover of Crimea, and the question is, will it really stop there, and what will we do if it doesn't?
Putin seems to have certainly an air of entitlement. What role can dialogue play, both from the people in the region, the EU, and the United States?
Well, it's difficult because we really need to start with a purpose in mind. I mean, there was a time when the President of the United States, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, the Pope, and organized labor all agreed in a higher purpose in helping these Eastern European territories be liberated from Russian domination. There's no longer talk about it. That's sort of discounted as Cold War thinking. And so we don't really have a clear, defined purpose for what we hope to achieve. We have talk about territorial integrity and things like that. And I think there's actually no point in having a conversation with Putin and his government about that. They have a revisionist view.
And they certainly don't seem to be anxious to sit at the table with the president,
right.
Do they?
No, I don't think that they mind. They seem to have indulged the president and other parts of government in long telephone conversations in recent days. I don't think they have a problem having some of these meetings and conversations, but the facts on the ground keep moving in their direction. It's been incremental, so there hasn't been quite the level of shock that the international community would usually have. But nonetheless, there is this steady encroachment.
About the EU, is there too much at stake for them personally in order to be more forceful?
Well, they do have conflicted interests. There are a number of entities in Europe that are invested in some of the large energy interests in Russia. And so there will be complicated financial and business dealings should sanctions really be put into play, which is why they've been slow to really back up that arm of the strategy. But really what we see is Vladimir Putin with a very clear plan that focuses on political, ethnic, economic, and military elements, and it's moving forward, and the West sort of scurrying and reaction with only talk of sanctions, slow on implementation.
Why? Was there anything that could have been done to prevent this? I mean, today Crimea, tomorrow what for Putin?
Well, when you look at other territories and other groups where there are ethnic Russians, where there's an historical claim, if not of sovereignty, of dominance by Russia, you would think that the Baltics, Poland, and any of the other areas on the periphery of Russia would be concerned by whatever precedent is set. I mean, essentially, you have Russia flooding a part of Ukrainian territory, putting military on the ground, and then saying, let's have a free and fair vote for self-determination. What kind of environment is that for the will of the people to be accurately reflected? Any of these other geographies could be subject to the same kind of treatment.
And how concerned are you? What do you predict happens from here?
Well, my concern is that we basically continue to talk and can't really come up with a purpose or a strategy, and Putin and Russia continue to take slowly and surely the dominance over this Eastern European territory, and it sends a signal to all allies that we are not reliable, and that essentially it's the opposite of the message that Reagan, Thatcher, and Pope John Paul said, which is you are not alone. These people do feel alone now.
You know, when I first started to cover this story, the first question I asked was, what would Ronald Reagan do? And let me come full circle, because I get the same answer from everyone else, that there isn't much we could do now. So action would he have taken? What can we learn from this situation, where it was, where it went, and where we are now?
Well, the first thing would be to live up to the promise that Ronald Reagan, Thatcher, and Pope John Paul II said, was you're not alone. So we should be there to provide aid, assistance, amplifying the will of the majority of the Ukrainian people, and delegitimizing the claims of those who seek to put them under oppression. All too often, our diplomats and others want to talk about the importance of great interests at stake in other places, but what Russia's doing is not moral, is not consistent with our interests, and at a minimum, we should be vocally pushing back on that.
Well said. Stephen Yates, as you always do, teach us a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamie.
Kelly?
The Bulls